Hola, mi gente. Welcome to MSP Unplugged. I am Paco Lebron, your host for today. Whether you are leading a team for the journey or running a single, nimble MSP, this is the place for you. Let me go ahead and introduce my co-host. We have none other than Corey Kirkendoll over at 5K Technical Services. Corey, how are you today?
Brother, I'm doing well, man. Doing well.
You're good here. Good to hear. All the way from Dallas in location, which will let you know where we are as we speak up. And we are here with none other than Mr. Rick Smith over at Renactus Technology. Rick, how are you, my friend?
I'm doing good. He psyched me out there. I thought it was a question, but I'm doing good. Glad to be here.
That's why you got to pay attention when we're live. But anyway, here as we talk about MSP Unplugged, as we start this podcast, we are actually live on location at Rick's office here at Renactus Technology in Newark, New Jersey, specifically in the town and city of Elizabeth. Is it town or city? In the city of Elizabeth, as
New Jersey.
Co-host would like to correct me. But as we start off with the podcast, we always start off with a tip, trick, or story. Rick, why don't you go ahead and start us off?
Okay. My tip today is something I just learned. We all just came back from Orlando from exchange this week. It's been a very long week. And one of the sessions talked about LinkedIn. We're talking about really about marketing and marketing your company and getting noticed. And one of the things I've learned through this, and there's several things, and we're actually planning on having the person who did it, Richard Bliss was his name, who did the talk. It was very good. So we're planning on having him on the podcast coming soon. But one of the things I did learn was when you put out a post, you really have 60 minutes for that post to go viral, right? For that post to reach as many people. And what makes those posts happen is comments. So if I put out a post in 60 minutes, I need someone to comment to me, then that gets to a certain part of their audience. Then I comment back, it reaches a broader part of my audience. And then if they comment or if someone else comments, this is how essentially your posts get big. We think all the time, just putting it out. The algorithm, what we learned, does not necessarily show it. It shows it to, I believe he said, less than 30% of your current audience sees your post. It grows as people comment. And the sweet spot is that first 60 minutes. So I'm saying this to keep it in mind. And again, we will have Richard on the show, so he'll do a much better job of explaining this. But keep it in mind, when you start making comments, you might want to use your team, use some friends, just to get some, I'm not saying fake it, but get some more interest. If they comment and you comment back, it will help you to get your post seen by more people. That's what we want, because that's how we reach our clients.
Yeah, I think it was interesting where I didn't see the presentation, but I was actually able to have some conversations with Richard at lunch, and he had mentioned that the company post or the company page itself only sees 2% of the audience that it ends up getting posted to, whereas the personal profile actually gets not only that 30% exposure, but only 10% of that post of that time with 60 minutes do you even attract of your specific audience. So it was a lot of great stats that he provided us. We will make sure to have him coming in here soon on the podcast as well. Corey, got a tip or a trick for us this week?
Yeah, I think the LinkedIn piece was good for everybody, because you start thinking about how the algorithm works and what you're really doing. Sometimes you may be doing yourself a disservice. I think the biggest part is the comment part, right? And not just thumbs up, not just whatever it is, but actually, in one thing, it's more like at least 5 words or more makes it better from a comment perspective. But even when a comment go back and forth, for me, I did a session one morning. We talked about the end of life of Windows 10 going to Windows 11. And what we did was we kind of switched it up a little bit and said, instead of just thinking about how Microsoft is doing that for Windows 10 to go to 11, there's a lot of things that got canceled. Office 2016, there was SQL Server 2016. There's a lot of Microsoft products that went end of life that won't be supported anymore. So one of the biggest deals is, if you're not having a conversation with your customers about those products, great opportunity to migrate them to the cloud. But also, Microsoft doing something really different here is they don't really want to do anything other than security updates to Windows 10 as an option going forward. But also, a lot of your machines that you have out there won't support Windows 11 as it goes forward. It's a great opportunity to start looking and say, hey, which machines need to be upgraded, and it's doing. Challenge is that if you haven't done that, you're just starting now, prices are going to be very different than they would have been back when you started at the end of last year or earlier last year. Right now, we probably have about 75, 80 machines that are just sitting here ready to be swapped out. And so it's definitely an opportunity out there to have some conversation with your customer.
I even heard that Windows, Microsoft even released that now the 8th, 9th, and 10th gen processors are no longer even compatible with, I forgot, either the last version or the version before of Windows, that you can no longer even go past that. So if you are replacing systems, I think that a lot of us were using that 8th generation as the cutoff, but really, when you talk about an 8th generation machine, you're talking well over 5 years old now. So you really want to make sure you have that conversation of replacing those machines and removing that technical debt that can help the proficiency of a business as well. For me, again, as you mentioned, we were at Exchange in Orlando this past week, and we actually sat into a good friend of ours, Matt Koenig's session. And Matt was really talking about how the delivery of sales and having those conversations with prospects always seem to be one-sided. And how do you have that conversation as a two-way? So what he really focused on is that not only are those prospects qualifying us, we should be doing the qualification to them in return. Specifically, this is how you can determine if a client is best for you. I think when we were sitting with him, he had a lot of funny jokes on some of the things on there. But the point of, if we know Matt, he's a character on his own. But really the biggest piece is that you should have at a minimum about 20 to 25 qualifying questions for yourself to ask your potential prospect to see if they are a good fit for you. And specifically, every question that you ask that prospect, you should know what is the answer you're looking to have from that question. Oftentimes, we will get a qualification template from a vendor or from a community group or a forum that we're from, but we don't never dive into what are we really trying to pull exactly from that prospect. And oftentimes, if you let them speak and ask them, okay, well, why? And asking them that simple, well, why, allows them to really divulge all of the answers you have for those questions. And really, it's just a matter of filling in the blanks at that point. But if you're using some type of template, if you're not qualified, if you are using a questionnaire to qualify, ensure that you are taking a look at those questions and specifically knowing what is the result or the answer you're looking for that question. Because oftentimes, if you're just asking a question for the sake of just it being on the questionnaire, then it's just taking up space for no reason. And why are you even asking? Any input on that? I know you were in the session as well.
Yeah, I was in, and one of the things that's important, he said, start with a customer avatar, right? Start with who you want to work with. What is your ideal customer? You may that will vary based on your industry, but based on what you focus on. But when you ask those questions, you cater it towards that, right? So then the answers that are coming back to you, they check those boxes. This is, someone that fits into the mold that we would want to work with, right? You'll know that because the part of this whole qualification conversation is to determine two things: whether you're a good fit for them and they're a good fit for you. And a lot of times what we do is we just want a customer. So we say, if you have computers, you're our guy or you're our gal, right? And that's not necessarily good. It doesn't necessarily turn into or make for a good working relationship. If you're dealing with someone who doesn't meet your standards or you don't do business the way they want you to do it, a bad relationship, no matter how much money it is a bad relationship. It can really ruin business. So have an idea first before you use any kind of template with questions is who you're trying to do business with. And that, again, I've learned over the years, it's not just about how many machines they have or, how many employees, because they can be a big company that would pay you a decent amount of money, but the cultures don't fit, right? How they want to do things doesn't fit the way you want to do things. We all know when we get stuck in those kind of relationships, it can be deadly, and it can be grinding to you personally and grinding to your business and to your employees. So just have an idea of who you want to work with, what those qualifications are, and then those questions from the questionnaire will then form themselves. And the answers will tell you if this is right for you.
Yeah, I mean, the only thing I would add to that is most of it's not a technical conversation either, right? Some of it's very business-like. If you're walking into a customer and they're a big government agency that has a net 90, net 190 pay from a payout perspective, that means they're going to be slow to pay. right? Because they're waiting for their cash to come in to pay you from that perspective. And if you really ask the question, if they're coming from another MSP or another provider, why are you leaving? And what makes it going to be different from this side? If they're saying because they wanted me to turn on NFA, they were really high on security. They wanted me to update my computers every 2 or 3 years. Well, that's the same thing. You're going to have those conversations. So you already know that as you go in it, that's going to be a challenge of where you want to go from that perspective. So definitely interview them because, when you say yes to one, you're saying no to something else. And that's just how it works.
What's funny is that it reminds me of a story. I actually had a prospect that we were qualifying, and her complaint was the MSP was doing their job, like to the point where she says, hey, I was the CEO. I shouldn't say who it was, but the CEO was mentioning, hey, if I'm out of town or I'm at a business trip, I don't want to have to worry about MFA to log in to get to what I need to do and get locked out. It's killing my efficiency of my workload, and they're not willing to back down. So I'm trying to find an MSP to do so. Right then and there, I said, you are not the one for us. And so it leads into another question is, I think all of us, when we're qualifying and we're trying to dive into what the prospect does want, we always tend to ask, okay, well, why are you leaving? But we don't often ask, well, what did you like about them? Because a lot of times, two things. One, you can kind of gauge their understanding of what is important to them. But two, if it was me, I'd like to try and replicate what would be nice for them, right? And so being able to check some of those things that they did like, we can only just improve on top of what they've already been experiencing so far. So shout out again to Matt Koenig. He's a great friend of ours here. He's over at one of the many vendor friends that we have here in the MSP Unplugged community.
That's at Newark.
I know.
Oh, okay.
I'm trying to keep it simple. So, but yes, but Matt Koenig over at Nodeware, shout out to you, my friend, because you are a friend of the community. So now we're going to go ahead and dive into the next topic. And the topic of the actual podcast is going to be tools that every MSP should know about. Now, what we are going to discuss and make sure that we keep and talk about the type of tool that we're referring to. And the reason for this is two things. One, for you, for the podcast listeners, these should be the tools that you should be aware of to try and introduce into your stack. But two, you're not here in New Jersey. And so for those that did come out for our New Jersey stop, they get to get all the gold. So for you to go ahead and find out some of these details, we implore you to head over to TechConUnplugged.com, find out on our remaining 2 stops, and you'll get some good old golden knowledge drops that we'll have here for us trio in this fine tour. All right. For tools that every MSP should know. We're going to go over the generic types of tools. We're going to try not to mention the brands just because y'all aren't sponsoring. So we're going to go ahead and kick it off to Mr. Rick Smith. Rick Smith, is there a tool or some type of system that you use that you feel that an MSP should know about or at least introduce into their stack?
Since I'm first, I get the easy one, right? Which is what everybody knows. And that you need some kind of RMM PSA, at least for now.
What's an RMM PSA?
Remote monitoring and management system. Something basically that would be what you would use to help you bring in information, analytical information, and connect back to a machine in order to service it, to know what's going on. PSA, professional service automation, right? And that's basically more so for your ticketing, your billing, things like that. So those are going to be the standards, which I'm sure everyone knows. So since I went first, I got the easy one.
Oh, man.
Well, let's dive in a little bit to what you mentioned on the RMM and PSA and why it's important for those in the room and those that are listening, right? These acronyms are always thrown around saying you need a PSA, you need an RMM, and everyone always says, why? Why do I need a PSA? Why do I need an RMM? Most importantly, the RMM allows you to do things that you can't do normally with a remote tool. The purpose of an RMM is not only to give you the insights that you want for an endpoint, but also to be able to do things against that endpoint as well, so that you don't have to interrupt your client and have to get a remote session to do something manually, that as if you were there in front of them and with that PC. So being able to use things like the command prompt, PowerShell trays, and being able to run commands against the system so that it can achieve the results in a matter of seconds/minutes versus you killing time to coordination, trying to go ahead and get them to install and have the actual remote software running, and then making sure that they have the time to be patient to not touch their computer so that you can do the thing that you want. So, and I know we've been there for quite some time where we've had to like disable input from the remote user or whatever the case may be. The RMM assists with a lot of these type of things. It also helps with preventative measures as well, enabling things from the start of a machine, such as encryption, allowing you to be able to install your particular stack or software so that you're not manually having to do that every single time. And that's really the importance of an RMM. Now, for a PSA, a lot of people tend to use a PSA just as a ticketing system. And we just went through this on Sunday when we were in the mastermind. That, you know, there's so much more that can be done across the PSA. If you're using your PSA as just a ticketing system today, grab your laptop, fold it up, knock yourself a little bit in the head, open it back up, email support, and ask what is their training modules. Because I think for you to have this such a powerful platform and not utilizing to the fullest, you don't understand on how much automation that you can do behind it. Things like automatically logging your ticketing time, because how many people here have forgotten to log their time when they've been on a specific site? How many times have you tried to argue for those leading a team to log their time into the PSA? And I'm not just talking about time when you're working with a specific issue for a client. I'm talking about internal time as well. Right. Because so for us in ProdigyTeks, we always identify 4 types of work in our business. There is business projects, internal projects, change requests, and unplanned work, which ends up torpedoing the other 3. If you don't know what's what, you can't help automate or try and be as efficient as possible. And that's how you can utilize the PSA to help program some of these things. It also allows you to help with the financial piece of it. And we just ran through this where if you're not doing your billing inside of your PSA, you're really missing a lot of information from the timing that is being entered and all of the products and things that have been introduced for a project, ticket, anything in between that you're utilizing, providing value to your client. You have to make sure that that ROI is present so that you can have the reporting to understand, is this a profitable client, or have I just created 25 change requests in the last 6 weeks and now I have a training issue that I need to make sure that they either are more efficient, or this may not be, as we mentioned before, this may be bad dollars coming in that need to be replaced with good dollars moving forward. I don't know if there's anything else.
That's hitting it on. That's hitting it right on the head. You know, when you get into it, if you're not leveraging your RMM and your PSA to the fullest, especially the PSA side, it's really hard for you to identify where and how your company is growing or what it's doing, right? You can't figure out all the efficiencies as far as utilization rates. Which one of your clients is costing you the most money? Which one of your techs spending the time on? And I guarantee you it's going to be the client that's paying you the least amount of money that's probably grabbing all the time from most of your high power techs and things from that perspective, because those are the ones who have either know that if I pick up the phone and call, I'm gonna get somebody right away, and I can hold them on the phone for a long time and really great. So if you don't know when to hire a new tech, when am I a little fat because I got more techs than cases coming in? Which one of those things doing? When do I need to go and have a conversation with a customer because I may have started them on a no plan and say, hey, I'm going to give you this amount of time for this amount of money. They took it and ran with it. Now they're here. Now you got to go revisit and says, hey, when we started this is where we were. This is where we need to go to now to be able to true up to that perspective. And actually, everybody knows about the pumpkin plan. And when you want to do from that perspective, how do you know which client that you need to get rid of, right? How do you know which your contracts are profitable? How do you know some of the things that you are offering, have they been profitable enough? Do you want to expand and creep offer them, or do you want to take them away? If you're not tracking that inside of your PSA, you don't know that information. So you may be still holding on to that 2400 baud modem support plan you have because it was good. It looks like it. Hope not, but that's maybe where you are. You don't know when to go kill it from those perspectives. So definitely leverage those tools, because I believe that those are the heartbeat of your organization, and everything else that you do around that should have some integration back into that. Nothing standalone.
Good information. Good information. Now, what would be, you say, a tool that you feel that an MSP should know about or should be introducing inside of their stack?
So I'm gonna go basic like Rick did. I think that all MSPs should have a very good voice over IP phone system that they use and support. One that they use internally, but also one that they either offer out to their customers because that is really the lifeline of how a customer calls you to be able to do a lot of things. And a lot of the newer systems out there have AI built into it to where every call is recorded, so that at that point in time, the AI actually listens to every call and can tell the sentiment of a call. So if a customer is angry, it can tell that, hey, here's what to do, and it can escalate automatically, right? But then once it's transcribed, those notes go directly into the ticket. So then no matter who picks up the ticket, they get the full transcription of the case, they get what a customer asked for, and they got a breakdown of the summary of what needs to be happening next. So it kind of brings that continuity through. So I think that a phone system for sure is one that you need to invest in, not just because it's cheap, not because it just rings, but something that actually brings some value to the business to help you on making sure that customer satisfaction is. That's what it's all about for us. We are in the service business. Customer satisfaction is where it starts. I believe that's where your money has to go.
Yeah, I mean, I think there's been this back and forth in our industry where VoIP has always been that ugly, do you want to take that on as a service and it becomes your problem? Or do you care if someone else brings it to you and now they start blaming you for your IT infrastructure and now you have to troubleshoot it anyway, right? So it depends on which side of the sword you want to go ahead and dabble in. I think you had made this point is, if you are going to humor and look into providing VoIP services, you want to ensure that you are at least utilizing it as much as possible, because you have to drink your own champagne. I think if you don't know what you don't know, it's going to be a lot harder to troubleshoot. And especially for something that you're doing day by day, it's really something that you need to figure out, all right, is this something I really want to do? Because I think we get into a point where everyone talks about we have to offer all these services. Hey, you have to do VoIP. Hey, you have to offer cyber insurance. Hey, you have to go. But there are ways of partnering with other type of vendors that can take that off of you, and you can go ahead and benefit some type, whether leveraging a master agent, partnering with another VoIP company or another MSP that may provide those services, and really alleviating you from having one additional headache. I think we all can agree here that we have enough to worry about. Yep. There's a lot of stuff that keeps us up at night, right? Why would this be one of those things that we introduce unless it's a very big business and ROI conversation that it could provide some benefit to the business? But what I say to you all is, when it comes to VoIP, if you are going to offer it, ensure that you have a great team behind it, meaning that support and a great resource, but also ensure that you're using it as well, because the same problems that you may be running into is what your clients may be running to as well. And it will help provide that value and, again, ROI for just ensuring that the client is in a better place.
Sure.
I think one of the things too to keep in mind is being able to, these guys are talking about, but being able to support it, right? So depending on the size you are in business, and really truly understanding your business and what you can provide and what you cannot, what you have time to provide for and what you cannot. It's okay if you don't have to support everything or sell everything immediately. Just because the MSP down the block does it, or what Corey does doesn't necessarily fit what Renactus can do, right? Our capabilities are a little different depending on size, depending on employees. So I think it's very important as we talk about any product. Everybody says VoIP's easy to sell. It's just money in the bank because you set up a phone system and then all you do is collect checks. But sometimes things do go wrong, right? Yep. So always plan, if it goes wrong, can we support it? Or if something goes wrong, how will we support it? If the VoIP company we work with is just, hey, just have your customers call us and we'll take care of it, that's one thing. But if that if you put it in and they're paying you, you're the first phone call. So can you take that phone call and can you support that business, that problem? So, and I think that's one of the first questions we need to ask. There's nothing to say that I don't do VoIP now, or any product, I don't do it now, but I will work to that level. So I think it's important that we just remember that I don't have to do, and I'm just using Corey as an example because he's to my right, but I don't have to do what Corey does, because what I do has to service me and how I service my clients.
All good points. All good points. So I actually have quite a few tools, but I'm only going to pick one for right now, and then we'll see how much of the rotation we'll have before we give these fine folks here who did come out a lot of the details that I want to go ahead and divulge. But I think one of the biggest pieces for me, as far as a tool that is required, in my opinion, for an MSP, is those that are managing Microsoft 365, is they should have a Microsoft 365 cloud management tool. Now, what does that mean? I would probably make it compared to similar to the RMM example that I provided. Having to manually update things inside of an endpoint, having to remote into a particular endpoint, and by endpoint I mean the workstation, laptop, PC, server. With Microsoft 365, for those that manage it, know that there isn't really a good multi-tenant solution that they provide. I think Lighthouse is probably the closest of what they have, but there are some things that are left to be desired, right? Having an augmented multi-tenant solution allows for a couple of things. One, it allows for better deployment and making sure that all of the particular settings, licensing, things of that nature are applied appropriately to all of your clients. Two, it allows you to ensure that all of the security settings that you have set, whether that's the conditional access policies, whether it's IP restrictions that you're allowing for your systems, even down to configurations of who should be synced to what. I truly believe that this is a tool that is a necessity to not only save time, but also to ensure that, just out of liability, to make sure that all of your clients fit in this standard, and being able to see in this quote unquote dashboard multi-tenant function platform that will allow you to say, okay, I can quote unquote check that box because I can see that it does have all the right settings across all of my clients, so that you're not caught as a surprise that something was not enabled when it should have. So that's one of the tools I have. You want to do another round robin to see if you got any other tools up in your arsenal here?
No, I'm gonna piggyback on your 365 tool because I think it's huge. We actually take something like that very similar, and we do what we call an MS 365 hardening project, right? And this tool allows us to do that as a project, to say, here's what we believe that the true baseline settings should be across the board for conditional access policy, who has access to what. We actually sell that as a project that says, we're going to harden your 365, and if you want us to support it, we'll continue to monitor it and ensure it goes down that path. And that's a huge thing. But the great part about these tools is now, once we come up, we have a thing called 5K client care, and this is a standard that we get to. This allows that if you're our customer, no matter if we're managing your 365, you have this baseline across the board. Instead of us having to go and configure that every time we bring on the customer, we have a template. When we bring on that customer and bring in their tenant, everybody gets that baseline day one right out of the box. So it just standardized across the board, which helps us as a support and my guys, because they don't have to figure out, says, are we doing this or we're not doing this, or we're doing this or we're not doing this. It's the same no matter what.
One of the things too to keep in mind, the customer necessarily, the only two things that really affect the client when we're doing any kind of work like this is MFA and password, right? If you think about it, because all the rest of it, they just want it to work.
Yeah.
But your tickets come all the time because customers don't like that extra 6 seconds it takes to do MFA. And for some reason, I don't know why it's universal, but every Monday, people can't remember their password that they just used on Friday. I don't know why that is. But one of the things that happens is a tool like some kind of Office 365 management tool makes it easy for, I hate it, makes it easy for you to go in. If you think about it, if you don't have some kind of tool, every time a client has an issue, you have to log into their individual tenant to make the correction that they need. So if you have some kind of tool that you're using, now you have one place to log in with all of your clients. You can just click that tenant and then do it. Fortunately, Microsoft doesn't offer us anything efficient enough, I would say, at this moment for us to do that. So we have to do a third party. So I do think if you do 365, and I guess a lot of them work with Google as well. But and I would suspect that most of us are utilizing or supporting 365. So this is probably something that's very convenient for the most important thing is time for you. Corey talked about the baseline, but the most important thing I think is having one place to go to do all of this, to save me the trouble of logging into individual tenants each time to change a common problem.
So I think I'll move on to another tool that I really like, and these two can go hand in hand. Is, for us, we're all about standardization, and a majority of our clients are Microsoft 365 clients, but we have a few clients that are on Google Workspace. We don't care. We put them on Microsoft anyway. But what we do is, so for us, we provide an inclusive service on the lines of CIS. And so for those that don't know, CIS is a security framework that has 18 controls as of right now. And what we do is we provide our plans on their implementation groups. So they have an implementation group 1, 2, and 3, IG1, IG2, IG3. And that's how we have our plans: Essentials, Essentials Plus, and then Essentials Custom for any regulatory or other items inside of IG3. Now, for what we do is we base each of our offerings on a user, a seat, and identity. That is the core of who we think a person should be, and everything wraps around it. We have chosen Microsoft 365 as that identity piece so that we can audit. So what does that mean? So we leverage Entra ID, which is a component inside of Microsoft, depending on the licensing that you purchase. We provide a Microsoft 365 business premium licensing to all of our clients that has a seat. That business premium licensing has many features involved with it, Entra ID being one. So what that allows me to do is ensure that that is what's logging into a particular workstation or PC. Paco, what does that mean for Google Workspace clients? Well, I'm glad you all asked. What we do for Google Workspace clients is that we actually provide them that same license, and that login is just going to be whatever the email address is .onmicrosoft.com. 9 times out of 10, they're going to stay logged into that computer anyway, so they're only going to see their name, and then they would just type in their code and whatnot. So once they log in, that's the identity. That's how we manage the systems. That's how we manage the workstations. Now, that's great for a new build. But when you have an old build, or you have someone in existing, or you're taking over a client, well, how do you address that? What we're going to go ahead and do is we use 2 things. There is a desktop backup tool that can copy all of the profile, contents, settings, passwords, bookmarks, printer settings, software that was installed. So you got to reinstall it, but you give the list of what was installed and printer list, and you can drop it all into a new profile. I don't like that one too much because there's a lot of work in there. You're only copying, or sometimes, depending if it's a dead drive, migrating some of those things, but there's a lot of work you have to do. The other thing I like to do is using a profile migration tool. That's what I really like to do. Now, what it does is that not only does it create that second profile, which is the Microsoft Entra ID user, but it will allow me to merge that local profile into the Entra ID profile, creating just one profile, but it assumes what the user had under that local profile. Now, the reason why this is great, because A, I don't have to do additional work. 2, I can enable all of the syncs that I normally do on OneDrive, which I back up a user's desktop, I back up a user's documents, their photos folder, because 9 times out of 10, they're saving stuff in there or in their OneDrive. And then I use a cloud backup product to back up OneDrive, so that not only is that backed up there, I have a third-party backup. And then depending on if it's a VIP or if it's a server, we have an image backup of the system as well. But this alleviates so much time, and it probably in 30 minutes, maybe an hour, versus you having to rebuild this entire system. This has been a great tool that we've used for quite some time on all of our systems to standardize on using Microsoft as that identity. I'm sure if there's anything
I mean, that's huge, but that's one of the pieces that a lot of people miss on that migration piece is migrating profiles. They just go, hey, I'm gonna create a SharePoint, and they'll have kind of half in one, half in the other. But you definitely got to take it through that whole process and do exactly what you said. Migrating the profile, getting it up there, make sure it's set, and the applications went is a huge big deal.
So I think, we've been chatting here for quite a bit. We've talked about several of the tools that you should know, but, I can't let them all go out without having a specific tool they can take home with them. So I think for those that are trying to standardize against something, we use CIS. And so, those 18 controls are very hard to understand. Not only try to make sure you can understand what they're talking about, because they're all written to a point where it's up to determination. But the biggest piece is what to do and how do you even address some of these controls. And they say that 1.1 and 1.2 are probably the hardest controls to even do, which is to manage inventory for your system. for your business or your client systems. So there is a toolkit brought to you by the Global Cyber Alliance called the GCA Toolkit. The GCA Toolkit will run you through all of the controls. There's a nice little video that they kind of go through for some of the training. And then they'll tell you certain tools and the methods behind what is CIS talking about. And CIS has partnered with GCA to have the ability to kind of explain these controls a little bit better. So I believe it is over on gca.org. We'll make sure we have that link in the show notes. But that is my parting gift with you all here for that specific tool. Not sure if you want to leverage
I got one tool for you. I got
Okay.
a tool that we missed. I mean, so we work with a large organization that have a lot of passwords everywhere, right? So one that I think gets missed is low-hanging fruit for me is a password manager, a good password manager. One that is a corporate-based password manager where the corporation owns those passwords and has individuals that do it, but ultimately be able to share passwords back and forth and things from that perspective, and also can put OTPs in there and kind of move it around. So when someone leaves, they don't take the passwords with them. They still stay within the company from that perspective. So I would always recommend that you have password managers part of your stack or out there from that perspective. Pick a good one. We know that some of them out there have it, but do your research and make sure that it has the ability that once, if I put my passwords in here and I decide to leave, I can transfer the password to a personal account if I needed to, or one that offers the corporate and individual passwords if I wanted to do that as well. But definitely highly recommend you do that from that perspective.
I think as even I've seen some companies, as far as our end clients, offer this as a benefit inside of their employee handbooks, where a lot of password manager companies, not only will you have a corporate license, but it also provides them a home license as well. And so as long as you're employed with the business, they, as far as for adoption, they have added this to their employee handbook as a benefit that, hey, we're going to provide you a password manager to not only just help with the company's cyber hygiene, but to have them have their things protected, but also the psychology of it all is to make sure that they have that muscle memory to use a password manager in every aspect of their life. So that's something in case for those of you having issues for clients adopting a password manager, that it could be led as a benefit to their employees as they onboard or inside of for HR and human resources. So.
I'm going to give one more. This is more internal than external, but it works for external. And I think everyone should have a CRM. And I know that a lot of times PSAs, some PSAs try to be the end all be all, and they have some kind of PSA built in, or some kind of CRM function built in. I say go with the full-fledged CRM. It doesn't have to be a super expensive one. I know. Say it. What's the name? Hello? No. High Level is what I use, but HubSpot is probably the most popular, probably the best, but it's extremely expensive, right? So depending on where your price points are, that might be a little more expensive for you. But I think a CRM is vital for a couple of reasons. One, you can communicate with your clients all the other things that are going on in the business, right? We just talked about the end of life of Windows 10. How about putting together an email that you can market out to everyone, keep having reminders go out to clients that this is coming up. Anything that may be happening, you can use a CRM for. For marketing purposes, for new clients, for prospecting, for prospective clients. A CRM is very important. You can automate as people come to your website for information. That information can be automated to go out. It gives you a way now to communicate with them. Again, as Paco mentioned, I use Go High Level, which I think is great, but I think you use whatever works for you. And that's what I'm saying. I just think that you need to go deeper than what's in the PSA. And it works to help you not only communicate with your current customers, but communicate with future customers, keep the marketing going. And this may be something that you don't do, depending on the size of your business, you may have a marketing company, but you may have someone else doing your marketing for you. I only shy away from that because no one knows your business better than the people inside your business. And to have someone else from an external side do your marketing, they're talking from a macro perspective of what they think every MSP or every MSP client wants. And you don't necessarily offer that, or that's not necessarily your culture. So it's probably best that's something that's managed internally. I think a CRM is extremely important for us to communicate, for us to just keep things going, get information in, get information out. And you'll be surprised. A lot of these can integrate into your PSA, can transfer information back and forth, however you may want to do it. But I just think it's vital to do it. And I think it's probably one of those things you probably should start with as well. You know, like as you build your stack, it should be one of those things that's not and also, but also it's I need, or I should have.
Yeah, you can get one more in there.
I got one more.
Just one more. And I think that something that gets missed a lot is, I think you got to find when we talk about Microsoft 365, we talk about what we're talking about is you got to find a good distributor, right? There's a whole lot out there that says, hey, I'm in the business with you. Here's what I want to do. Find a distributor that's a partner that's willing to help you understand Microsoft, understand your business, understand how to help you grow and how to get the most out of that, right? And lucky today, you get a chance to hang out with one of the best out there in the industry. So definitely want to make sure you get a good distributor like our partner from OpenText that is actually here with us today to actually figuring out how that works.
Yeah, like I said, I mean, to all the point, we appreciate our sponsor of this podcast for Jersey Stop. But I think one of the things, and I will end on this tool and then kind of wrap up with final words, is I think vulnerability assessment has been going out a lot lately. But there's so many unknowns behind that. There are some saying that you can do pen testing. There are some that you can automate pen testing, figure out what a vulnerability assessment, and getting that report out. There's been a lot of conversation behind these pieces, but most important, finding a vendor that can help you figure out what are those external and internal vulnerabilities you have that are just exploits you have not seen. These grow into a big point of understanding what you have that spawn conversations with your client on tools that you've been trying to let them know. Or on the reverse side, it allows them to understand, okay, these are things that we probably missed. Make sure we patch that up because every day MSPs like ourselves are prospecting and trying to figure out how to drum up business. All you need is an MSP to wedge yourself between your clients because you didn't have the time to have the conversation with them, or you couldn't find the tool that was best. There are definitely quite a few tools out there, depending on the range of if you're looking for a partner, if you're looking at resource-wise, or just does it fit the qualified stack that you're offering to your clients for not only your business, but ultimately, although an MSP is here to help mitigate risks, our purpose here is to make sure that our clients make them as defensible as possible so that they're not being negligent. With that, any passing words before we round it out?
I'm just going to go back to what I said in the beginning. We talk about tools. It's the same thing we talked about prospects or customers, right? Know who you want your customer. The same thing with purchasing tools. We all have gotten caught. I've been doing this for a long time, so they can both attest to the fact that we sometimes get caught up in the shiny object syndrome, right? You go to a show or you see something, someone calls you and you see a demonstration. It's like, wow, that's the greatest. I could use that to, they convince you basically that you need this. But the fact of the matter is, again, you need to define what you need based on what you're offering. And you do, again, I say, you do not have to offer everything immediately. So just be conscious of that because you can find yourself, we talk about tech debt, let's talk about tool debt, right?
Yeah.
When you're managing or you're purchasing or using tools or paying for tools, that you're not even using because you thought there was something that someone convinced you was great for your business, but you find that it doesn't fit into your way of doing business. It doesn't fit into your mode. So just be conscious of that. I say, be real slow to adapt, quick to move on, right? As opposed to doing it the other way. Be slow about making a decision. test it out. Maybe test it in your own environment, or create a virtual environment. Create some kind of environment where you test it out and let it run before you're spending money, time, energy on something that doesn't fit what you're trying to do or what will help you actually service your customers.
Sure. I always say, man, I'm a big sports guy. So sometimes, man, all the trick plays and all the funky stuff to have it, take it back to the basics, go back to the fundamentals, make sure you got a good foundation to build off of, and then just come up from that. And that's where the tools are going to help you.
Couldn't have said it any better myself. And for those that tuned in and for those in attendance, we appreciate you attending here today. Tune in every week as we drop a video podcast over at youtube.com/MSP Unplugged. Like, subscribe, and hit that notification button so you can be notified whenever a new episode is available. I usually make a very snarky comment at this point, talking about whose faces for radio and things like that, but I'm feeling in a good mood right now. We're all with good people here. But if you'd like to take us with you on the go, we are on everyone's favorite podcatcher app. We're on Amazon Music, Apple Podcast, and on Spotify, to name a few. You can feel free to find us over there. And don't forget about the next stop on our tour on TechCon Unplugged. You can find us over at techconunplugged.com. And again, for all of you, we appreciate you listening. We appreciate all of you attending today. And we will see you next time on MSP Unplugged.